Happy Friday! A little bit cry day. And we'll talk about that in a minute. We are here to talk about WandaVision, ladies and gentlemen, as we've been doing for every Friday on these last few weeks, and next week's our last one. But this is our penultimate episode to talk about WandaVision, the show, as you know, we created. I am Roth Cornet. That is Eric Goldman. With our very minds and our will, and just wanting it to exist, we created it. Not unlike the witchery that exists on this show so delightfully. This is your spoiler warning. I'm going to give you a little extra window, though, before I do our graphics, to get out of here if you haven't seen it yet, and then come back when you have seen it, because we're going to talk about it. It's going to be wonderful. But first, I will pause to say thank you so much for watching. We really, really do appreciate it. I have missed being here with you guys on a daily basis, so it's been great to be here on Fridays. Please subscribe to our channels for videos almost every day. And we are going to do a couple of call outs. First of all, we talked about last week what's been going on in Texas and the United States, where they have been in a severe crisis following the winter storms and the loss of electricity. So there is a link in the description for how you can help if you choose to. And then also, we just want to talk about a couple of things that we have going on that we think you'll really, really enjoy. One is the Fandom 5 is back today at 4 p.m. EST on Fandom Games. So that's our other channel, the Fandom Games channel, with the debut of host Bailey Myers, who you're absolutely going to love, and her cat Goose, I think. And they will be tackling...
Very likely.
Very likely. And they will be tackling Nintendo. You have the opportunity to win real dollar bills. So go check that out today at 4 p.m. PST. And also, back to WandaVision, Eric, you have a great article that might relate to this week's episode.
Yeah, we have an article up at Fandom right now, written by someone you know, Matt Fowler. But it was we got to talk to the production designer and the cinematographer for the show, which obviously with this show is kind of extra cool, and the what is it like jumping around in eras. But also, I thought we were very happy we got the cinematographer right after Agatha All Along happened. Because he talks about doing that and having to film that through the entirety of the season. So there's some fun tidbits about there, and I believe the link for that is in the description as well.
All right, that's enough business. Now let's get into witch business with spoilers. In 5, 4, 3, 2, versus graphics. And here we go. All right. So, Eric, the first thing that there's so much to unpack in this episode. First of all, you know, you were sharing with me and that you were crying at midnight. I was crying at, I think, 6 in the morning when I was watching it. This really was the episode that captured all of the themes that we'd been talking about, with the revisitation of Wanda's trauma, and also connecting the dots to her emotional need to disappear into television, and how she's used that as an emotional outlet to process her trauma throughout her life. So that was really, really well done. So I want to talk about that and how impactful, and I thought really, really beautiful that was. But also, I want to talk about Agatha, who we've said, you know, she isn't always this arch villain. Was feeling really like an arch villain at the top here to me.
Yeah, it seems like that.
Well, but then it started to feel a little mixed to me. It started to feel a little bit like tough love. I have a mentor who is not quite like this, but who throughout our time working together and often will utilize some tough love techniques, not quite this tough, tough love techniques with me. And she's doing it in a sense for her own good, so that she can face her trauma, but she's also really doing it because she wants to understand her power. Anyway, Eric, talk to me. What did you think?
I thought this was an amazing episode. Just what an emotional impact it had. Definitely cried watching it. It was funny because this is the second week in a row that you couldn't access WandaVision at midnight, at least on the West Coast. It was overwhelmed, the Disney Plus system, and getting all sorts of bad screens. And when I finally got through, because I was tweeting my frustration about that, I said, okay, I'm in. And I said happy. And then I put question mark, WandaVision watching, because I had a feeling this might not be a very happy episode going in. And it wasn't at all. In fact, it was like one of the most sort of emotionally wrenching things we've ever seen the MCU do. But really fantastic, I thought. And Elizabeth Olsen, man, this was like this is like, if they're going to give an Emmy nomination for acting on a Marvel show, this would be the one, this would be
For
the one
both of
she'd be.
them. For both of them.
I think they're both fantastic, yeah. But she especially gets sort of like so much to do, which is really impressive. Yeah, I thought it was great, and it's very interesting to see. Me and Ryan were slacking a little bit about this earlier, but this episode especially really kind of unraveled, not 100%, but it took away the possibility of a lot of the theories that have been going around.
Yeah, it
And
did.
I'm totally okay with that. I think the theories are super fun, but at the end of the day, when this show began, we thought this is a show about a woman who's gone through a lot of tragedy and loss and grief and how she's processing that through the filter of having superpowers. And this episode said that is exactly what you're watching. And they're doing a really fantastic job of that, I think, and of contextualizing it. And we mentioned this before, but the fact that they had a really heavy lift here because they had to give you depth that wasn't really there for Wanda and Vision in the movies, where they only had a handful of scenes with very good actors to convey a lot. But I think they're doing a hell of a job there, too, of making me really feel this loss and the emotion between them. And I was just really impressed by what they pulled off here, and how I think it'll make going back and watching those movies even like, oh man, like knowing kind of everything that happened for them then, happened for Wanda in her entire life, and is coming for them in the future.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, listen, this was about grief the whole time. It was about processing trauma the whole time. And it's not just, I think what they've done smartly here, we look at those commercials, right? And now it's harkening back each episode, reflecting a time in her life where she experienced trauma. And now we're revisiting some of those moments. And Stark Industries, which showed up in the first, I believe it was the first commercial that we saw, is obviously, I mean, look at what she's looking at, right? But I will say that something that is MCU related also happens in that moment. That's a small reveal, but a reveal, which is this idea that, previously we thought that her powers were created 100%. But they weren't 100% just created. They were also natural. They were amplified by quite a bit, but she wouldn't even have been able to process that if she didn't also naturally have some abilities. And that's what she's talking about when she was a little baby witch that would have, quote, died on the vine, where she, without this other opportunity, what that says to me, and I think, Eric, you had brought this up previously, maybe this is a show where they start to introduce the idea of mutants. And that's a maybe subtle nod to the idea that she was already a little bit a mutant.
Yeah, and I think it works well with what we knew before, because I do believe they said in either the end of Winter Soldier, when we first saw them in a glimpse, or in Age of Ultron, that Pietro and Wanda were the only ones to survive these tests. So there was that, like, there's something about them that let them survive. But now we're getting this extra thing that she, at least, we don't know about Pietro, but she at least used abilities before this even happened. And it does feel, again, I think this show, to its credit, is being pure to itself and what its themes are. But at the same time, of course, they're laying groundwork for the future. So yes, if you're looking for is this laying the groundwork for mutants? I think that's absolutely in there as well, with this idea, because we have not met a person in the movies. I know the TV shows with Inhumans, there's a lot of other stuff, but in the MCU proper, in these films, we have not met someone who was born with powers on Earth until now. They're saying, no, she actually did have powers. She did this before anything happened to her with the Mind Stone later. So it does feel like, okay, could be setting up things for the future with the mutant of it all.
And then we also have to address, I mean, listen, what you were saying previously, and I think that the show has done really well. And we talked about, even in the first episode, like, television is this place that we use to escape, right? There's like a number of tools we use as human beings to escape. I mean, it's an entertainment. We're not just watching it to escape our trauma, but it is a way that people do that, So you have a number of ways that you can step outside of your own world and into a fantasy that feels better to you. And this is one that many people use, that Wanda clearly used, and then she used again to create this idealized version of her life, because she had suffered so much loss. I mean, my God, her parents, her brother, and then the one person that, as Agatha says, brought her back from the brink is Vision. So she recreates him. So we have to talk about that opportunity, that power, the up level of her power that the grief seemed to unleash, that losing Vision seemed to unleash, the idea that she becomes the Scarlet Witch, but also with Agatha admitting that she brought in Peter What I'm still a little unclear on, and maybe this you captured this a little more than I did. I was unclear was did she just manifest him? Did she take a puppy and do magic on the puppy and make it look like Peter, or is that him?
I am now feeling at this moment, like next week I could change it all. At this moment, I feel 90% that's Peter from the X-Men movies because
Yeah,
she says possession. She specifically
yeah,
says possession. She says she couldn't bring back Pietro to life. She talks about necromancy and the corpse wasn't there for her to use. And so she says she used a form of possession. She doesn't say who that is. Again, it's really weird for me to say, oh, I possessed some random guy and I gave him speed powers.
yeah.
I think it's I found someone out there. And I also think we need to be ready for the finale not answering that in a straightforward way. There could be a reference to him saying, I don't know where I'm from, or I don't know, I can't remember either what she did to me or where I was from before that. And I think that might be saved for a movie with multiverse in its title.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think that this episode, because this episode stripped away so much, and it stripped away like, oh, who caused the hex and then brought Wanda? Because there was still that question, maybe someone else did it and then put her
Yeah.
in it. But this
Yeah.
seemed to say no, it was all her, which at the end of the day is what we thought when the show first was beginning. And I think that sometimes the simplest answer is the answer, and that's okay as long as you're like dramatically engaged in it. And so I think it is probably Peter from the X-Men movies right now, because at this point it would seem almost ludicrous to be like, oh no, he's really some other character or random schmo. That wouldn't be satisfying.
Yeah, not satisfying at all. I really think it's him too, which opens up another question, which is like, okay, well, if it is him, are the X-Men that like they're not here,
No.
They're not in this reality. So she must have pulled him in from another dimension somehow, which opens up a whole other worm of questions.
Yeah.
But coming back to this, I think what was really dramatically, to your point, dramatically satisfying about this episode, and I'm fine with it just being Wanda's grief that took over,
Mhm.
is I thought two things worked really well. One, like we've been talking about the idea of television as escape, but storytelling is also a way it offers catharsis.
Yeah.
It's a way to process your trauma. It's a way to process your pain and what you've experienced in your life. She's just bringing that literally to life. But also, you notice that as she rolls into this town, it is not this beautiful, idyllic
Right.
town that she then menaces and takes over. They never say this, which I like, but you get the sense that she's looking around her and she's like, this town's toe up from the flow up.
Mm-hmm.
It looks on the outside like I can't believe I just used that phrase, and I'll ask for your forgiveness of the audience and yourself, Eric, right now. But it looks like what I feel like on the inside, and I can make it better for all of us.
Yeah.
I think on some level that's what she's reconciled, that what she's reasoning on some subconscious level. These people aren't happy and neither am I, and I'm going to make it better for all of us. So it's not like this really cruel subjecting them to her will and taking away their autonomy, although that is ultimately the result that
Yeah.
happens, because it is, even if your truth is ugly, and I think that's what Agatha is saying to her, it's healthy for you to face it, right?
Yeah.
So, because she says the only way forward is back, and the real phrase is the only way forward is through. But same thing, she has to go through the pain, right?
Mm-hmm.
She has to experience it in order to get past it. With that in mind, is Vision real?
I mean,
He's real now in two places. There's
right.
like maybe bad Vision.
Yeah, yeah. So now we know that the Vision. I mean, first of all, we have this. The reveal that Hayward is just a lying liar who lies because she did
Yeah.
not steal the corpse.
Yes.
He faked that, and so she never took his corpse back. She's not been sleeping with the corpse, which was once like concern of ours. But having relations with the corpse. No, she manifested him. Again, we talked about was Pietro conjured, which we don't think he was, but this Vision she just made. He's not real. I mean, I think he's physically there, and I think again that speaks to the extent of her powers. But she just completely created him, which again sets up where is this finale gonna go? And it seems like we seem prepared for a lot of sadness because let's talk about the other Vision, or White Vision as some people are calling him, which is a very straight out of the comics thing. There was a storyline in the comics that we already kind of knew they were referencing when we thought that she stole the body and he was all torn apart, where the government took Vision, tore him all apart. She got him back, but when they rebuilt him, he was all white and he lost all of his humanity. He just he didn't love her anymore. He was just like a robot in a way he'd never been. And this is kind of an even darker take on it, where they've purposely rebuilt him into this weapon. We presume in the finale, she will probably have to, she and the Vision she created will have to fight this Vision. And I don't know. I mean, there is the version where he sticks around, because in the comics for many years, it took a long time for him to kind of get back that humanity, but he did. But it also feels like that might not be the case here. It might just be like she has to say goodbye, that this is about like getting to say goodbye to the love of her life, burying him, which is now we know what she really wanted to do with his body. So that's right now where I'm leaning, is that she will both physically have to defeat that Vision, and then the one that she created, because she can't hold on to this town. We don't think the show's going to end with like, you're going to stay under my spell forever, everyone. And this Vision will stay with me. So I think she's going to have to say goodbye, and it will be a very literal, like he's still inside you sort of thing. It might be quite literal in that extent.
Yeah, I think so too, because we saw that he wasn't able to exist outside of the hex, and that opens up the question about the kids as well, because they seemingly were also manifested, right? Mm-hmm. So what we don't know, because it's getting a little wormholey here, but Vision she manifested in that moment, and he exists as a part of this created reality inside this hex, which I do like calling it that.
Yeah.
But the kids came out of her body, which is real, which is manifest. So are they physically able to withstand and exist outside of the hex? That we don't know yet.
We don't know, yeah.
So it opens up a whole bunch of interesting questions, but it's clearly we're looking at a potential Vision versus Vision fight.
Yes.
Does White Vision withstand? Does he last? Is he going to be one of is it at the end of this, we thought we were setting up for the story of how Wanda becomes the villain? Nope. It's how Vision becomes the villain.
Right.
Imagine what a villain to have. Pretty powerful. So she's pretty powerful and pretty scary. Yes. And then also I do return to this question of Agatha, in the sense of, I mean, she appears to be pretty arch and evil and just wanting to get her at her power. But as you've described, she was a mentor who was sometimes very harsh.
Yeah.
And that's what it felt like to me. Like the opening is like, wow, she's just evil. She just killed her mom. To be fair, her mom was also going to kill her. But then at some point I thought, no, I mean, this is actually what she needs. She needs to face her trauma.
I think I think there's a little bit of a Sithy side to Agatha here, in that I do think she sees this power in Wanda. It sort of drew her to Wanda, and she wants to cultivate it. And I think she sees a potential, protege in Wanda. And that's someone that she could make. Again, it's a very different interpretation from the comics, because she was never like a villain in the way she is here. But I do think that maybe she didn't intend for the kids to happen, but it certainly proves something to her, because at the end of the episode where she's like, you control chaos magic, you can create life. Yeah. And those kids are proof of concept of that. Yeah. And so it might just be like, hey, we can go off and be like a evil witchy family here. Might be kind of her end goal a little more. And the kids, so they are kind of part of her plan, but maybe they weren't her plan from the beginning. It wasn't like, she will make these kids for me. It was like, oh, I feel this woman is amazingly powerful. And then look, she created these kids. That's part of it too. I'm right. And I want to kind of get to the core of that and bring it out even more.
And bring it out and also be a part of it, maybe control it, maybe take some for myself if that's possible, because it's clear that she was able to grow her own magic at a very, like Agatha, that she was very, very, very powerful. But then at the end of the episode, it's almost like she's saying, you're too dangerous to exist. You don't know that yet, but you can't exist because you're too dangerous. I mean, it's very unclear where she's going, if she's trying to dismantle the kids, dismantle Wanda, say it's too, I don't want you in the world, or where she's going at the end of the episode. It's just a little bit unclear to me. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I still think it is more about I want you to know I wanted to know even more about what you are. I want you to know what you are, so that we can do something with that together. It is about, again, it is about power and feeling like it can help her too. But I don't think it's right now, it doesn't seem like it's I want to kill you, Wanda. It is more about I can make use of you. They have that big, the final line of the episode, of course, before the post credit is the "You're a Scarlet Witch" line, which, you know, is on one hand, of course, it's like a meta sort of aspect thing because they've never used that name in the MCU until now. They finally gave her comic book name. It is also a brand new thing for the MCU, and as far as I remember in the comics, she just had the name Scarlet Witch when she showed up, and it was never like, oh, that name has a legacy, you know. So this is an invention. Again, the MCU, they're taking a lot from the comics. They're also coming up with their own spins on it. So giving that name any sort of extra significance is something of their own. And we still need to learn a little bit more about what that means. But certainly, yeah, it just feels like they've built Wanda up now to be so powerful. And we have a lot of questions about Doctor Strange and her role in it and just what it is she's up to in that film. So I am very curious. Oh, and by the way, I'm glad, William, you just put up those images.
I love that moment.
Beautiful moment. And also, of course, what she sees, which is like herself, we're guessing, and she has the headdress. So we'll probably see her in the costume, like a real version of the Scarlet Witch costume in the finale, we're guessing, certainly in Doctor Strange. I mean, that was a really cool moment.
Yeah, she's seeing herself there. I did love also where Agatha was like, through her own use of magic, showing Wanda, you're doing this specific type of spell and this one, on this one, on this one, and at scale. You know what I mean? And she's sort of like, she's so in awe of her. And I mean, listen, it was a device also. But she's so in awe of her and trying to get her to see her own power and how absolutely extraordinary it is. It did feel to me like what she was saying is like, I was here, you showed up. And then I was just like, whoa, like, you know, and she got herself involved because she wanted to understand where this massive power was coming from and what the source was, and how she could get a slice of it, probably was what it felt like to me. Like, what bad luck to just show up in the town.
Also, I don't know if I didn't necessarily
drawn there.
Yeah, I don't know if Agatha, I think that was my impression, was Agatha was probably drawn to her. I also wanted to mention what you know, very good point about like the town being kind of downtrodden. Is we should mention, like, why would Vision buy their lot of land there? Again, this is the 5 years later of it all, and the fact that we don't know, like, even though everyone just returned, again, this is days after Endgame. So yes, 50% of people just came back, but we can kind of, if we want, we can extrapolate, because we've, you know, there's so many questions that the whole blip raises about people who remarried or moved away or moved on with their life. And so I still think you can get away with saying this town went to hell in those 5 years, because if you're a small town anyway and 50% of the people disappear, even if they just returned, what if other people moved away? Like, you know, they're all just dealing with so much at this moment. And that's probably why they're in the state they're in, which we can extrapolate. A lot of places probably are right now.
Yeah. And the economic repercussions would have been extraordinary. I mean, like, you would have just had the chance to start to readjust when all of a sudden now you have 50% of the population back who also need, you know, supplies.
Right.
So I mean, the whole world would fall apart is the truth in a circumstance like that. But anyway, we're rolling with it because it's the MCU. I will say, in terms of the MCU, we've talked a long time about, you know, way back since, I think, Winter Soldier, you know, the idea of them touching on these, and they've talked about the idea of them touching on these various genres. The one that they never really did touch on for me, as this is the first time, is horror. I mean, this is like really a scary thriller show, you know, in a lot of ways. It's my favorite kind of horror, which is very, very steeped in like family relationships and trauma and real emotion. Although sometimes I like stuff like Slumber Party Massacre as well. But yeah, here's one little nit to pick. Can we not with Salem?
I totally get it. Yeah. Because I know that the instinct people will say is, well, in the comics, Agatha's backstory was in Salem, but if they did it today, it wouldn't be. So it's, the whole idea, it's always a little icky to be like that there are witches there at all, even if you do what they did here, which is they were mostly good. Agatha was the bad one, but just the whole idea that real people got killed in Salem who were not witches. I totally get why it's always like, even as someone who enjoyed the TV show Salem, I always get that it's a weird thing to go into. Yeah,
it's just weird, you know. I mean, like, there's so much history with Salem and what happened there, and like there's a million different circumstances that I think collided, a number of circumstances that collided that created that tragedy. But it was a tragedy, and one of the main causes and for the circumstance was a lot of the women that were tried as witches and killed owned property and didn't, or like had access to resources, not owned property, but had access to resources. And it was like, whatever. It was just a very ugly moment in our history. And I just always think it's really weird to put
It
like
is.
real witches there. To your point, I was a little more comfortable because they weren't like, they were flipping it a little bit where they
Yeah.
were trying to take care of one of their own who had gone astray and they weren't evil, but
Right.
it always does it. Ugh.
It's weird. But I will say, to the horror of it all, I mean, I remember distinctly, because I was there at the panel when Kevin Feige announced all of, like, well, it wasn't all, but at the time we thought all of Phase 4 2 years ago at Comic-Con. He very distinctly said Doctor Strange in the Mouth of Madness, in the Multiverse of Madness, would be their first like horror movie. And then he also said WandaVision would lead directly into that movie. So it does kind of make sense that this show has now kind of added a horror element if it's, directly connecting to a movie that has already been hyped up as being a horror type thing. And they hired Sam Raimi to direct it. So that all makes sense, tying it all together. Yes.
I honestly, it's going to be me because Raimi is also like that incredible blend of horror comedy.
Yeah.
So Ryan, we're going to be going to you in a moment to hear the feedback from the folks at home. Did they love it? Did they hate it? What did they love? What are their guesses about where we go forward? It feels like, Eric, we're in a pretty good position now for this finale to wrap up in terms of like the final confrontation, but it's like a four-way confrontation.
Yeah.
It's Vision v. Vision, Wanda and Agatha, but then also in the mix, we still have Monica floating around, probably to team up with Wanda to help her.
And she's with Peter, we think, not Pietro. Is that what Agatha called him?
And so, but if fake Vision can wake up Peter to who he really is, out of Agatha's spell instead of Wanda's spell, then I would imagine he would join their side.
He might already, like, of course, the way they did that tag at the end of last week, we don't know if he's there to be like, I got you, or to be like, hey, what are you doing? Because I'm not under this woman's spell right now. And I'm confused, so there's a couple ways they could do it. It's funny, there's a lot to deal with. I think I feel pretty confident right now, especially after this episode, that they will nail the sort of emotional core of it. I think people do need to be ready for lingering threads, very purpose. Like, again, I don't think they're going to have fake Pietro say like, oh, I'm from a universe where I'm part of a team called X-Men. Like, they're not going to go that far. They're going to leave things to the future. And Monica, Monica's going to go off to have her future in Captain Marvel 2. So I think with Wanda and Vision, I think there'll be some very specific sort of closure there. And I also wanted to mention before we talk to the folks in the chat is that what a great scene. One of my favorite scenes in all of the MCU now is that scene with Wanda and Vision that was set at the Avengers compound. Everyone is saying, what a great quote when Vision, Paul Bettany was fantastic in that scene with the what is grief if not love preserving? Persevering. Sorry. Fantastic scene, a scene that, again, like, so about what she was going through and what he provided, and showing her kind of falling in love with him in that moment. As much as we had the cute cooking scene in Civil War, I think this added way more to show like what would connect them together. Just really instantly became one of my favorite scenes in the entire MCU.
Yeah, I love the scene too. I mean, both because it's, you can see Vision awakening to himself and that struggle. I mean, the struggle to understand emotions is always an interesting one and can fall very flat in different genres, but the struggle to understand emotion, because like he so clearly wants what's hurting her. Like, right. He wants the opportunity to have experienced the very thing that would leave you open to being hurt, right? Mm-hmm. Which is the story of trauma. Like, either you just shut down and you don't allow yourself to have those experiences anymore, or you keep living and you understand that the pain is a part of it. So, I thought it was absolutely beautiful too. And you're right. I mean, Bettany was great. She's just, I think Elizabeth Olsen is just clearly one of our greatest actresses, and she is incredible in the show. But the whole cast is bringing this to life so beautifully. And I gotta say, just aside from being one of my favorite MCU things, like this is just great television.
It's great television, because they have to do the heavy lift in this scene of basically making you completely tune out that he is a dude painted red,
I know.
and they completely do. You just see two people connecting over her grief and his confusion, but wanting to connect to her. And it's a beautiful scene that kind of gets you past the fact that there's this weird robot dude sitting there in such a wonderful way.
And I also do love this little moment when he laughs and he goes, "Oh, I'm sorry," and she's like, "No, it was funny," and he's like, "It was, right? Like that's what funny is."
Right. By the way, I tweeted about this. I said, does this mean it's going to be really hard to ever cast Bryan Cranston in the MCU when they watched Bryan Cranston? And a bunch of people were tweeting back to me, well, they talk about Star Wars and there's Natalie Portman and Samuel Jackson. I'm like, yeah, but it's different to reference the title of the movie and then watching an actor on screen. Yeah.
That's a really good point. That's funny. Also, I did think it was notable that the character that I thought Vision slash Paul Bettany captured the best was the mannerisms of kind of Bryan Cranston from Malcolm a little bit. Like I thought he captured those really, really well. So Ryan, what are they saying in the chat? What are the people saying?
Hey. Oh, we're saying lots in the chats. Let me go through. I was having a little bit of a discussion about, Feige had said, like that these events lead up to Doctor Strange 2, and obviously we know that WandaVision is involved, but that doesn't necessarily, I think there's a little bit of a distinction between that and like you guys are saying that the show will have closure for this story at the end of the series.
Yeah.
But we will need to know why Wanda is going to be in Doctor Strange 2, kind of, So I do think how they balance that in the finale, people were talking about that, like where is she going to end up after this, that both, brings closure to this story, but also could leave her open to those events. Roth?
What if, because she's going to have to say goodbye to Vision again, for the third time now, by the way, how much does that suck? Like, Jesus. And she's lost everybody, but the closest things that she has left to an approximation of a relative is Peter. So what if he goes back to his old dimension and she goes with him?
I just think that, we know that this Spider-Man sequel, which is coming out in between, we have a name for it now, No Way Home. I don't have to say the Spider-Man sequel. That movie's opening in between WandaVision and Doctor Strange and is, supposedly part of this kind of it's like a 3-part story. And so, yeah, I feel like that could be it, Roth, or just something about what she does. Again, I do think it's going to be that she inadvertently or not, is sort of helps like break the multiverse or the dimensions, or it turns out that she can just open those barriers or something happens. I do think there's a good chance of a Benedict Cumberbatch post-credit scene next week. We'll see. But yeah, something has to establish that, like, with Doctor Strange, that like what happened here is going to have these ramifications for the multiverse at large.
Yeah. Ryan, what else are they saying?
It really is going to be a competition between her and Wonder Woman having to say goodbye to Steve Trevor. Like how many times these movies can make these characters have to tearfully say goodbye to their loved ones. Right. We'll have to keep a track of it so far. They're up 3-2. So there's a couple other things I wanted to give a shout out to at Lionel Armilio. Can you ask them what they think about the two visions merging so he can exist outside the hex? That's
Ooh, I like where your head's at. I like that.
That certainly seems possible. I almost wonder if it would be too quick to do it now, though. Again, it's like, I don't know how much they want to undercut a show about grief with like, now he's back. Like, I also think like it's a comic book based thing, which means anything's possible. So that's why I do think there's the possibility that like evil Vision sticks around at the end, because one day maybe he could, get that back, and maybe that would be because she can inside her kind of bring the Vision she knew back. So I wonder if that is a possibility in the long term, but I feel like it might feel too quick to like just have that be part of the finale of this show.
Yeah, I mean, it was something that I wondered during the episode too. And I don't know, because I don't think, to your point, Eric, this is an episode about letting go. I mean, not an episode, this is a series about letting go, about facing the reality. And then if you never have to face it,
yeah,
Which in comics you don't really ever have to face
You
it.
often don't.
But I also don't think she's just going to be wandering around. I don't sense that she's going to just be wandering around back at like this Earth plane. I just don't think she is by the end of this. But who knows? I like that idea. What else we got?
Yeah, so I think there's like two or three more interesting things to touch on from the fans. I'll go to Kieran V next. Do y'all love the y'all? Shout out to my other Southern people. Do y'all think the next episode might be 1 hour, 1 hour 30 minutes, or 2 hours just to tie in all the plot threads that they have left?
I don't know.
I don't know about getting to 2 hours. I think a solid hour. It might be a solid hour, though. You know, this was the longest one. I think
it's gone longer and longer each time. Yeah.
I find the long credits thing weird because that did throw me off with like the 7 minutes of credits where you think that you still have like 7 minutes left. So I do know that people had brought that up too. But moving on, this isn't about me. Madison J asks, some people are saying these reveals about Wanda's powers are quote unquote retcons. Do you agree with that?
I mean, yes and no. It certainly matches the comics where they kept just adding to her powers often without really explaining it. Because at first she was introduced as a mutant who could, and they called it probability hex, which is a term they made sure to have Agatha say in this episode, which is she could basically make like accidents happen. Like, you know, if a bad guy, someone's running at her, she waves her hands and he'll trip or something wacky will happen. It was only later they're like, she's an actual witch, and it kept getting more and more powerful. So it is a retcon. It's certainly fitting the comics, but I think it's one of those things where when you have a character this powerful, you kind of want to explain it more. I mean, look, I'll give this episode credit for a lot of things, which is trying to kind of retroactively explain her powers, but also explain like her backstory, make sense of it. They had being a little meta with that accent sure comes and goes. The fact that she and Pietro joined Hydra and volunteered to be tested on, which had been mentioned in the movies but kind of glossed over. There is, when you have a lot of characters and they go on for years and years, it does become a little convoluted. And I think this episode did their best to make it all mesh.
Here's what I would say, echoing that a little bit, Eric. I mean, when they made the second joke about her accent coming and going, I was actually a little annoyed. I was like, well, at this point, you're just making it uncomfortable for Elizabeth Olsen because she doesn't do a very good job of that one thing, and she's such a great actress. But then when they actually made it a part of her emotional core that she had practiced English with her family, and that's maybe why it would come and go a little bit, I was like, okay, well done, you. But here's what I would say about her powers. It is retcons a little bit, but it's, hey, this is comics, and retcons happen. But I prefer that her powers have been earned through very human events, right? They come out and they are escalating through levels of pain. And that in a way is like, not to get too metaphysical or whatever, but when you think about people who are healers and things like that, or have some kind of healing message in the world, that's often the case. They've gone through a lot. They've gone through a really painful initiatory experience. And because they've been able to go through it, they have something powerful to offer, right? So like, I don't mind that. And I like it a lot better than someone just having an accident and then being really overpowered.
Yeah.
And it's not earned and it's not all that interesting. This is so earned and it's completely interesting. To me.
Yeah, I know. I totally agree. And I also want to mention, you mentioned the when they're watching the Dick Van Dyke show at the beginning. That was the first time I got really emotional, even before they decided to make it even more wrenching and be like, oh, this is when her parents died. Just the way they had that, it was just really lovely with her watching the screen, and that this was her escape and she loved it, and the music, it was all really well done. I also wanted to mention that there's so much speculation because Paul Bettany had that funny quote about like, I got to work with someone I always wanted my whole life.
Yeah.
And there's the two big theories after this episode are he was being silly and he gets to work with himself.
Yeah.
But the other one is, could it be Dick Van Dyke? Because this episode made it so much significance. People are like, oh, Patrick Stewart, they're going into like the Marvel of it all. But not only did this show make the Dick Van Dyke show like the most important one to her, they also talked about how they met with Dick Van Dyke, like the producers when they were prepping this show. So I feel like, is there going to be some weird meta thing with him? Is a possibility.
Oh, that'd be awesome. But hopefully it's not, because she does make that joke. Like at the end of the episode, they wake up and it's all been a dream. it's never really happened, which was, I hope we're not looking at that. That's something I don't want us to be looking
You don't
at.
want this to all be a dream. Yeah.
I almost never.
No.
I think we can do one more and then we'll I don't know, we'll just be out of here.
Cool. Then let's end on, it's two fan comments, but they're on the same. They're both on Agnes/Agatha, so I'll read them off. So first, Renee Jimenez, question for Roth. Do you think Agnes/Agatha is performing an initiation for Wanda in the sense of lifting the veil with pain so she can come into her full power? And a combo on top of that, Christopher Vossen, do you think Agatha sticks around after WandaVision? Catherine Hahn has been incredible, by the way.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. And that's what I was feeling like. And like I said, to me, it felt like, listen, you would never really want this in reality. You would never really, in fact, it would be completely unethical for like a therapist or a mentor of any kind to force someone to relive their trauma. That's re-traumatizing and actually very, very dangerous. But in the context of this show and the context of her unleashing her powers, and in the context of Wanda coming into her own, that's what it felt like to me. It felt like tough love. I am going to bring you through this so that you can get to the other side. So that, because a lot of times when you like psychologically, if somebody's been through something, they find a way to step out of the experience, right? Whether that's like dissociation or going into other tools to disconnect from the pain. But until you live through the full experience of the pain, you're always stuck inside of it. It still has a hold of you. So it did feel that way to me. I love that idea. And it also feels like, in terms of witch business, an initiatory experience for a witch to come into her full power, right? Love that. Agree with you. See you. Love you. Awesome. And man, Catherine Hahn better stay. She's amazing. Come on.
Yeah, I started to wonder, like, is she in Doctor Strange and they haven't told us? Like, yeah, like it certainly seems, since she has now become this very powerful, pivotal part of the magical side of the MCU herself, that certainly seems like a possibility.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much. What great comments and thoughts from you guys today. Thank you for joining us. It's been fun always, Eric. I know we get a couple of jokes each and every time about how we go longer than the episode, but I think we just about matched it this time.
Pretty similar.
So we're getting better, or I don't know.
If you include the credits, we'll add credits to the end that are of equal.
Excellent.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, guys. Love you guys. Please be safe, be well, and take care of yourselves out there. And we'll see you next week for the finale.